very good afternoon, good morning, good evening, depending on where you're joining us in the world, and welcome back to NGPA's Up in the Air webinar series. My name is Brian Gambino, president of the NGPA. So happy to have you joining us today as we kind of dig into ways to best prep for your next career move, whether that be a job switch, whether that be a complete career change for you. We have an incredible group of folks here today. We're going to help you walk you through that, the best ways to prepare for that change and the best ways to use technology to really have a leg up on the competition. But first, a little bit about NGPA. Thank you so much again for joining us here at Up in the Air. We've been having these webinars now for 8 months, and it has been NGPA's answer to these pandemic times. We haven't been able to be in person the way that we want. We weren't able to gather together at the epic, if I may say so myself, NGPA Industry Expo out in Palm Springs, California this past February. So we've been doing these webinars on a relatively regular basis to bring the information needed within the aviation community and to connect our members, our supporters, and the aviation community in general directly with the movers, shakers, and the leaders of airlines and aviation companies to kind of connect you, to get you to understand how they've been dealing with the pandemic and ways that you can best prepare yourself for when that rebound in aviation definitely comes through. So it's been great having you all join us, and we've certainly appreciated all the support here at NGPA. A little bit about our organization. We are the worldwide LGBTQ aviation community. We are 3,000 members strong here now at NGPA, and our mission has always been simple for the 31 years of our history. That has been to build, support, and unite the aviation community worldwide. And we do that through a multitude of ways, through our advocacy efforts, through our educational efforts, through our scholarship efforts, and also, very importantly, through our social efforts. So many people within the LGBTQ community, unfortunately, are not welcomed when they come to true terms with themselves by their families, and they need to choose a family. They need to find a family that supports them. They need to find people that can get them through life and tell them that they are important, that they are loved. And the NGPA has always been that network, that affirming social network for our members. And we truly appreciate those allies who continue to support us. So by attending these Up in the Air webinars, you're definitely giving NGPA the support we need to continue trucking along and to continue supporting our members in all aspects of the industry, and as well as learning more about the NGPA. And you could do that by heading to www.ngpa.org. In the top right corner, you can, of course, click on Join Now and become a member. That's a great way to support our mission, a great way to support NGPA, and a great way to support these Up in the Air webinars, which we will continue to bring you on a regular basis, and they will always be free for the community at large and, of course, for our membership. So thank you again for participating. For those of you who are tuning in on our podcast, if you couldn't be live with us here on the webinar, thanks so much for tuning into that. Always be sure to check out all of our content on our podcast channels. You can search NGPA Podcast on your favorite place to get podcasts, whether that be Spotify, iHeartRadio, or Pandora. You'll always have us to take along with you on your next commute, on your next flight, on your next train ride, your next car ride, maybe on your next workout. So wherever you're headed, NGPA is there with you mobily with the NGPA podcast. Today, we're really excited, like I said, to talk to members of Coradine Aviation as well as Pilotbase, which, as I said, they work to give a leg up on the competition for when you're preparing for that next job. Coradine has been an incredible supporter of the NGPA for such a long time. They are platinum level sponsors of the NGPA, supporting us financially, supporting us with webinars like these, supporting us with discounts for our members on their famous LogTen Pro product, as well as offering scholarships to NGPA members. This is the second year that NGPA and Coradine have partnered to offer a CFI and CFII scholarship for our NGPA members. By the way, our scholarship selection window is open right now and closes on August 31st. You can check that out at ngpa.org/scholarships. Coradine has always worked to create technology to accelerate the future of aviation, and they've been stellar advocates to supporting diversity, equity, and inclusion throughout the entire aviation space. We're also welcoming Pilotbase today. Pilotbase empowers pilots to take control of their careers by providing the latest pilot jobs, transparent resources, and state-of-the-art career tools for their followers. So happy to have a lovely group with us today, a lovely panel. No stranger to those of you who have attended our NGPA Up in the Air webinars before. We have the Vice President of Marketing and Sales for Coradine. That's Mr. Paul Edney. We have the Vice President of Service and Operations. That's Heather McCarthy for Coradine. And also joining us from Pilotbase, the CEO of Pilotbase, it's Ben Hall. So thank you so much to our teams here. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for bringing this information to our NGPA membership. And without further ado, I'll pass it over to you, Paul. Thanks so much for being here, and always a pleasure to see you.
Fabulous. Thanks so much, Brian. I don't think I could have put it better myself in terms of who we are and what we do. So I probably won't add to that. And Brian did say that he might steal the thunder before we got on before we got onto the webinar. But actually, I really appreciated everything you said, and we're just so happy to be here and happy to support the NGPA. We're just excited to be part of the scholarship program, excited to offer LogTen to NGPA members and to all of those applicants who may not get a scholarship, but they're going to walk away with something. They always get access to LogTen as part of our sponsorship and our support of the NGPA. So we're really excited to be here and excited to bring along one of our partners, Ben Hall and Pilotbase, who we've had a fantastic time working with over the last, God, I don't know, 10 months or so, Ben, and we'll talk about that in terms of what that partnership and that integration with Pilotbase can offer pilots and offer you. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen, and then we can start to run through this. Give me 1 second. Okay. And I will make sure. Great.
And while you're doing that, Paul, you mentioned something that I failed to mention. Another incredible point of our relationship with Coradine, applying for scholarships. Anyone who applies for an NGPA scholarship, whether you are selected or not, our friends at Coradine are kind enough to give you a year's worth of a subscription to LogTen Pro, which is another incredible benefit to applying to NGPA scholarships. Of course, we want to make sure that we are able to provide scholarships to everyone who applies. Obviously, that's not always the case, but for anyone who applies for NGPA scholarships, we'll be in touch with you at the end of the selection window, probably later towards October or November, and connect you with our friends at Coradine who are ready to give you LogTen Pro to make sure that you have the best tools you can for logging all your flight time. And quite a tool it is. So thank you, Paul and Heather and the team at Coradine for making that happen for our members and our scholarship happen.
You bet. Thanks, Brian. So everybody, I'm just checking in. Technically, we're good on seeing this screen here, are we? Awesome. Okay, so as I said, Brian introduced us pretty well. I'm the VP of Marketing and Sales at Coradine. My name's Paul. I'm really excited to be here. We've been around basically since the beginning in terms of pilot logbook service for pilots, and really focused on iOS and Mac. We've got over 100,000 users worldwide. Our focus is really on making your life easier and accelerating the vision of aviation in the future. And I would pass on. I'm going to pass on to Heather to introduce herself quickly, and then maybe she can pass on to Ben.
Paul, hey everybody, welcome. Thank you so much for joining. Really excited to be talking with you all again. Thank you, NGPA, for hosting us. And I'm VP of Service and Operations for Coradine. Looking forward to this webinar. On to you, Ben.
Hey, everybody. Firstly, I'd just like to say a huge thank you to Brian and Luke, who's working away behind the scenes, and the whole NGPA team for having me on this webinar, and for Paul and Heather as well, because I'm effectively riding on their coattails a little bit. So as an intro to myself, my name is Ben Hall. I've been a pilot for about 12 years. So I've flown pretty much every Airbus there is, including the Airbus A380, which I flew for Etihad and British Airways. And I currently fly the Falcon business jet for a special mission operator in the UK. Last year, I founded Pilotbase, so we're a really new company. And our mission is basically to support pilots however we can. Initially, it was just through the pandemic, but we've grown at such a rate that we're looking a long way into the future now. And we're coming up with some really useful tools to help you find some great jobs. That's it from me for the intro. On to the next slide. Right, so We thought to kick things off, it'd probably be a good idea to provide you with a bit of a global view of the aviation industry at the moment. And that should give you a better understanding of the pilot recruitment market moving forward. So these graphs, they're a bit small to see, but they're from a company called Radarbox, which I highly recommend if you're into sort of stats. Basically, what you're looking at is a 7-day rolling average of the number of flights operated by each airline. So on the left here, you see American Airlines, on the right is Southwest. The gray line you've got across the middle of the chart is the 2019 flight numbers. So you can see that's pretty steady. The dark green line is the 2020 numbers. So you can basically see when COVID hit there with the big drop off and the recovery. And then the green sort of area graph is this year, 2021 to date. And basically what you can see from here is the USA are doing pretty well, right? So American Airlines on the left there, your current flight numbers are actually well above 2019 levels, and Southwest are really close to 2019 levels. So that's why we're seeing this sort of bit of a hiring spree at the moment of pilots in the US, with all the legacy carriers hiring, which then has a knock-on effect to the regionals and below. Can we just pop into the next slide, please, Paul? Now, disappointingly, this is the story in Europe. So on the left, we've got exact same timescales. On the left here, we've got British Airways, and on the right is EasyJet. So for those of you who don't know, they're pretty comparable with American Airlines and Southwest in terms of sort of market share. And we are nowhere near 2019 levels in Europe. And that's basically due to the fact that we don't really have a domestic market. We've got occasional domestic routes, but the vast majority of our travel is international, and that's obviously been blocked by all of the restrictions due to COVID. There is a bit of an uptick in the last few months, so there is some hope as the vaccine rollout is getting there. But yeah, it's a bit more of a struggle in the rest of the world. America seems to be forging ahead at the moment, whereas we might be probably sort of 12 to 18 months before getting back to pre-2019 levels. If we just go on to the next slide, you'll actually see, though, there are a couple of areas which have won during the pandemic. So what I've just shown you is the airlines. But actually, if you look at cargo operators and private jet operators, both of them have seen a significant uptick in the last sort of 18 months or so. So cargo operators, people need stuff, right? Companies like Amazon are just growing and getting bigger and bigger and bigger. So cargo operators are really expanding their operations. But the really interesting one for me is the private jet operators. So basically what's happened is you've got this sort of band of people who are pretty wealthy, and usually they would travel first class, but they couldn't quite justify private jet travel. And now they've realized that private jet travel is far more convenient and there's a lot less restrictions. They can go wherever they want. So private jet operations have really spiked. So if we just go on to the next slide, you can actually see some more graphs on here. Apologies about all the graphs, I'm a bit of a data geek. This is the last one, I promise. So on the left one, so the left-hand chart here relates to the cargo. So that is CTK levels, which is cargo ton kilometers by air travel. So that's effectively how much cargo is being flown around. And as you can see, current figures are basically the highest they've ever been. On the right-hand side, they're all business jets, just split by size of business jet, and the smaller business jets are doing better. So that is that band of people where they've basically transitioned from first class commercial travel into the private jet world. So they're using the smaller jets. So that industry is booming. Next slide, please. So now we've given you a bit of a brief overview of where the industry is at as a whole. We want to give you a bit more information about how to get the pilot job you want, really. So jobs in America, as I mentioned, will be more abundant than the rest of the world at the moment, but everybody else will catch up. And you need to put yourself in the best position possible to be able to harness those positions when they do come around. When it comes to pilot recruitment, you can think of the process of being split into sort of 3 distinct stages. So firstly, you have to find the job you want. You then have to apply for it. And if your application is accepted, you go through the interview process. And if all goes well, you get placed in a holding pool until the company have a training course for you. So we're just going to quickly run through each of these sections individually. So you kind of know what to expect, what your options are, and how to give yourself the best chance. So Paul, if we can get on to searching for jobs. So the job search. So how do you find your perfect job? Well, at the moment, to be honest, it's a little bit all over the place. There are a whole bunch of pilot job websites out there. A lot of them are terrible. I am a little bit biased, but pretty bad. So you can go on the job websites. You can obviously go on pilotbase.com. We've got a whole bunch of jobs available. You can browse individual company websites. You can check on social media. In the private jet world especially, there are loads of jobs found simply through word of mouth. And lastly, there are forums, which I recommend you avoid at all costs because they can turn into toxic places very, very quickly. But basically, Pilotbase and Coradine, we kind of believe in a connected world using technology to improve lots of things about sort of pilot administration, but specifically in this case, how to find jobs. So basically, we're developing tools that can save you a whole load of time and effort. So what we're doing at Pilotbase is we're currently building an algorithm which automatically matches your job preferences to your licenses, your certifications, your flight experience. So there's no need to search all over the place for different jobs. You can just log on to pilotbase.com and you'll see everything you're qualified for. A vital part of this, though, is valid data. So just like when you're programming in your FMS on your aircraft, rubbish data in, rubbish data out. So to keep your data up to date, this is one of the main reasons we've teamed up with Coradine to make this a little bit easier for you. So Paul will just, if you go on to the next slide, you'll show us how we do that.
So you're looking for a job. You start by heading to a pilot job search site to enter the all-important totals from your logbook. It's time to make the dream a reality. Oh, times are out of date, and you're back to fill in those totals again. And again. And again. And again. Time should update automatically. Introducing automated logbook to job profile integration. Finally, your flight and type totals updated automatically. Brought to you by Coradine Aviation's LogTen and Pilotbase. Visit pilotbase.com to get started.
So yeah, as you can see from that.
So right, you're looking.
It's like ankle glitch.
As you can see from that cool little video that Coradine produced, we've basically created an integration where you can plug your LogTen logbook straight into Pilotbase, so you never have to update your profile ever again. So when we release our algorithm, which should be in the next few months, there's really nothing for you to do for the job search. You can literally just log onto your account, all your details will be automatically updated, and you'll find all the jobs that you're eligible for. So once you found your job, you now have to apply for the role, right? So this is where it gets tricky. There's a huge variation of application formats which happen at the moment. Some operators just want like a simple CV or resume, and other operators, which I've had the displeasure of applying for, want sort of a 20-page detailed application form completed. And with that as well, there are all sorts of weird and wonderful flight hour calculations that different operators want, depending on their local regulations or, whatever's just in their operations manual. For some reason, these operators create some really wacky requirements. So these application forms can take forever. So another cool feature we're working on is automatic applications. So we've obviously already got your pilot data from the job search. So why can't we just use the same pilot data to complete the application forms? So whichever method the company uses for the applications, they'll always want an accurate breakdown of your flying hours. And this is where the LogTen app comes into its own. Over to you.
I'll get there eventually.
We all had a dream to fly, to have a career in the sky. Perhaps most of us didn't realize that our dream to fly for a living would involve being a mathematician? Okay, 6,624.7 total minus 1,164.8 night equals 7 minus 8, borrow the 1, or being a lawyer. Okay, rest period means a continuous period determined prospectively during which the flight crew member is free from all restraint by the certificate holder, including freedom from present responsibility. What the Keep the dream alive. Automate all that other stuff with LogTen Pro, the professional pilot's choice.
Great. So thanks a lot, Ben. That was really useful and interesting. Brian, did you want to, sorry, so I jump in there for a second.
I just wanted to say, you can play that video again. I've already told you that's like my favorite video. I watch it for fun sometimes. What? I enjoy it very much. Well done.
Yeah, thanks. That's great. So I mean, I think everybody is understands the benefit of having an electronic logbook for their flight time. I'm going to be very quick with this, and I'm really going to highlight some of the key features that LogTen has that are unique to LogTen in many ways, or certainly again, a slightly biased opinion, but I think we do it better than most others. So I'm going to highlight a few of these features that save you time and various other things. So from the time saving side of things, we have our Fly Now feature, which actually completely automates as much of the process as possible in terms of through GPS, doing your from and to airports, or your to and from airports, and adding all the data in from your previous flight. So it's really trying to automate stuff. We're trying to make stuff as quick and easy as possible for pilots. You know, you don't have a lot of time to fill in your logbook if you're doing it, you know, while you're taking off, and you want to make it as easy as it can be. So we've automated as much as we can. We also just launched widgets, iOS widgets, which we're really excited about. Like literally a few weeks ago, we launched this, which gives you a very quick and easy. You don't even have to open LogTen to see, you know, how long to your next flight. Any limits, currency, or certificate warnings that you might have, which is quite unique to LogTen, and we've perfected, I think, that those warnings and alerts to make sure that you're flying safe and that you're within your limits. And now it's displayed right on your home screen through our widgets. And we do have a link that I'm hoping Heather can add to the chat for everyone that has a list of a whole bunch of links that we put together for this webinar, which also gives a link to the widgets feature and shows you how to use that and what it offers. Pretty easy to set up. Obviously, backing up is a really, really important aspect to our customers. It's the one thing that we always get back in surveys we do. Like it's a must that your data is backed up really solidly. And LogTen gives you two options on that. So you can back up to Dropbox, you can back up to iCloud, and you can do this whenever you want to ensure that your data is always backed up. We also have a fairly unique feature in terms of what we call our Analyze tab, which actually gives you answers to some of those key questions that you might need for an interview, like instantly. So turbine, multi-engine, single engine, PIC, all that data and the data for each of your aircraft are all instantly accessible through the Analyze tab in LogTen. And then I'm going to, the other side of things in terms of organizing and filtering is that there's customization available in LogTen. So you can create your own smart groups to customize whatever, if you want to, whatever information you want to find out through LogTen, as long as it's in the logbook, you can actually create a smart group for that and see it on, again, in this plan tab in the radar section of LogTen, which is in the plan section, which is highlighted here, right here. I can't, yeah, we said we're going to do that afterwards. So the other side of things is obviously for interviews, you want to print your report and have it be as professional as possible. You want your summaries as well. So LogTen has over 100 reports. They have pretty much any report you want to produce, you can create. We also have pilot credentials integration and airline apps report, which are being used quite a lot these days. So lots and lots of options in terms of how you export your data. Obviously, accuracy is essential when it comes to your logbook. And I just, this is my way of displaying, the old versus the new. And you look at the left side and you've got the kind of scratched out. And this is actually somebody's logbook. So this is, and on the right, it's completely clean, crisp. There's no issues in terms of errors or anything like that. And as I mentioned, the other side of it in terms of safety and legality is LogTen has worked really hard to create warnings and a very make it as easy as possible for pilots to see where they are with their flying and whether they're still within flight duty rest limits that they have. And we have, as you can see on the top here, it may be a little small, but it's called Time Loop. And this actually is a scrollable time where you can have your schedules inputted, and LogTen will automatically warn you if there's any potential issues with upcoming flights. So it's a great way to just make sure, providing you put in those duty times, that you're keeping track of those things, and LogTen will warn you if there's anything coming up. And I just highlighted that on the right-hand side. You've got our Mac version as well, which gives you a kind of graph of where you're at with your flying. What I wanted to do is pass on to Heather now, and I'll probably pass the screen too, so I'll stop sharing. Heather's going to do a little demo for us on a couple of things that features LogTen has. Off you go.
Thanks, Paul. Are you able to see my screen okay?
Yep.
Fantastic. Thanks so much. So a couple of quick things that Paul was touching on, using LogTen to be able to slice and dice your data so that you can see sort of any aspect of your flight, data entries, depending on who's asking for what. But before you get into that, and before maybe you consider printing a logbook and applying, we have a pretty neat feature called our Logbook Audit Report. Paul, earlier also you mentioned putting in a link to our main site that gives all of the links for the things that we're mentioning, and that is in the chat. It was posted a little bit earlier. It's a little bit along down the list, but there is a link for our flight audit report, which you can install. And I'm going to demo really quickly what happens when you run that. Go to reports. It's in the My Reports section. And we've got a flight audit report that will look through every single entry in your logbook and bring up any potential entries that may have been misentered, or maybe duplicates, or maybe are missing some seat times. And a couple of the flights that we're highlighting here. The first section here is showing entries without total time. They're from, it looks like 2016. So we're going to go ahead and just ignore these two top sections for now for this demonstration purpose, and skip down to the third section where we're looking at entries for total seat time is different than total time. And we're seeing there's two entries, both from the 3rd of August, 2021. The top entry has a total time of 2 hours and 17 minutes, but only has PIC time of 2 hours. So we're going to make a note to go and check that. The second entry is showing 1 hour and 1 minute of total flight time, but there's no seat time listed anywhere. The last section there is comparing against nighttime as well, and it's those same 2 entries. So we can make a pretty educated guess that once we address these 2 entries, looking at the total time not matching seat time, that it's also going to potentially resolve that last section as well. So we can go back into the logbook, and I've conveniently got these flights here up near the top, and we can look in more detail. We can say, oh yeah, forgot to enter seat time for this one. With LogTen Mac, you go ahead and tap in the time field that you want to populate, and if you hit the space bar, it'll automatically fill in with the total time that is already present. So we've resolved that one. The second flight here, for whatever reason, has a total time of 2 hours and 17 minutes, but maybe that was a fat fingered entry for the manual entry of PIC time. We don't want it to be 2 hours even, we want it to match the total time. So again, I highlighted the entry and tapped on the space bar, and that has been resolved there. So we can now go back and run the report one more time to see if that's resolved the issues. And what we're expecting to see is those last 2 sections should just be gone. They won't even show up anymore. And scrolling all the way down through the report preview, and they have disappeared. So if you wanted to, depending on how detailed you want to get and how much you already know about entries that you have already entered, maybe you're already aware about entries without total time and potential duplicate entries, you can go through the report, address the issues that do come up, and then run it again and expect to see more of a clean slate. Now that we've gone through the logbook audit, we're ready to start getting some solid numbers. Ben and both Paul had mentioned sort of the unique and interesting different combinations of hours and numbers that airlines look for. As an example, Air Japan has a set list of hours and combinations of times in jet and PIC and cross country that they want to see. With paper logbooks, this could be a very time consuming, take half of your day running through your logbook, entering multiple things in the calculator, trying to figure out what goes where and how many hours have added up there. With LogTen, you can do this pretty simply. I'll demonstrate really quickly creating a smart group to view, let's say we want to see PIC and cross country hours where they're both existing. So you want to see how many cross country hours you have as PIC. I'm going to go ahead and just title this group PIC cross country. You can title it however you like. In our criteria selection, we're going to go down to the time field, and we want to select PIC time value is greater than 0. Add a second criteria, also from the time field, cross country is greater than 0. The default settings here are going to show all logbook entry types. You can choose to filter this if you like. The important part here is the default is set to match all of the following criteria. So we do also have the option to do an any option, but for this particular purpose, we want to see both cross country and PIC in the same flight. We do have results set to show as total time. If I click on OK, it takes a mere second, and we see our total time of all our entries that include cross country and PIC is 987 hours and 16 minutes, which within that less than a minute that it took to set up the group and display the hours, we have an instant answer to that question for Air Japan of how many PIC cross country hours you have. You can even look further into that if you like. In the Mac version, you have time sorted by columns here at the bottom of the column. And since this group is selected, it's showing only the flights that have PIC and cross country. You can confirm there's 987 hours of PIC, 987 hours of cross country. You can also see, if you need to, if you like, within those entries, 808 of those hours were flown at night. So that's a really nice way to be able to instantly filter your data based off of practically any type of criteria. We do have a set of groups, of smart groups, a bundle of smart groups set up to view a couple of those criteria that Air Japan want, and you can find those links also in the master link that we sent out earlier in the chat. Unless there's any questions or something I may have skipped over, this concludes the demonstration portion.
Thanks, Heather.
Yeah.
That's great. I'll share my screen again, and then we can, there we go. All right. I think, Ben, you're up again.
Yeah. Thanks for that, Heather. So what Heather's just gone through there for the Air Japan application was actually a real life example from myself, which, I mean, she said half a day. I think it probably took me about 2 weeks to try and get that information without an electronic logbook. So yeah, for job applications, honestly, an electronic logbook is absolutely vital. So I'm just going to run through some CV tips now, just to kind of give yourself the best chance of standing out from the rest of the crowds if a CV is required as part of the application. You've done the hardest bit now, so getting your logbook hours in order. So I'm just going to run through kind of the general format and each of the sections that you should have in a CV, and just kind of give you some hints and tips from a recruiter's perspective. So it's good to point out, I think, that a pilot CV, or I'm going to use the word CV and resume interchangeably here. I know it's subtly different over in the States, but what I'm talking about is basically a 2-page show off of yourself. So a pilot CV is different from a regular CV. So organize it in a way which is easy for pilot recruiters to read is a really good idea. So with the pilot CV, the main difference is the recruiters initially are just looking for the basics, right? So they're just looking to see, are you qualified for the job? So if you tick those boxes, then you can make sure your flight experience and license information is as close to the top of the CV as possible. So obviously personal details go at the top. That's kind of a given. But the next thing the recruiters want to see is, do you have the required hours? Do you have the type ratings, the license, the certification, the endorsements on your license? Do you have those things? So the recruiters can tick their boxes, and then once they're happy with that, they can then run through the rest of your CV to see kind of how you stand out from the rest. So after you put those basics in, you then want to organize your CV in a way that you think kind of shows you off in the best light possible. So if you've got like a really impressive career history, that should be the next thing going on your CV. Alternatively, if your career history is a bit light, but you've got a PhD in aviation from Harvard or something, I recommend putting that first before your work experience. The most important thing with CVs, though, is keep it relevant to the job. There's no point putting, your experience as a barista 15 years ago on a pilot application for an airline. It just has no relevance to the job whatsoever. It's also worth noting that a lot of HR departments nowadays use automated CV parsing software. So it's really important that your CV is like structured in a certain way, so it's basically computer readable. It's really simple to do that. Basically, don't use any fancy software to make your CV in the first place. Have really clearly defined section titles. So as you can see on the example there on the screen, personal details. I mean, that's a pretty standard title, and a computer will be able to read that and understand what that is. Same with kind of work experience and education. Don't try and be too fancy with the words you use on your CV. Also, make sure, just for the computer's point of view as well, just make sure there's some spaces between your CV. I've seen some absolute horror shows where people have tried to cram 30 years of experience onto 2 pages, and they're kind of using size 6 font, and it's all squished together. And I mean, a computer wouldn't be able to read it, a human wouldn't be able to read it. It's just not usable at all. So we're sort of big believers in less is more with CVs. You clearly want to demonstrate that your experience and background are suitable for the job, and add a few things that you really think will make yourself stand out, but leave the actual details to the interview. Next slide, please. So talking about the interview brings me nicely along to the interview process. I mean, this is a huge topic in itself. We could do a webinar on each possible interview stage. So I'll keep this quite high level for the time being. And it's good to understand that interviews really vary like hugely between companies and locations and type of operation. I've been to one interview in my life, which was literally a sort of 20-minute chat with a chief pilot. And I've been to one which was 5 full days of testing. So it depends on loads of factors, and I'm just going to touch on each element of what you might face, just to give you an understanding. And if you need any further information, you can feel free to reach out to me directly regarding any of this. So yeah, interviews themselves can take many forms. You can have them over the phone. There's a lot of them online at the moment, or obviously in person. It doesn't matter which one you're doing, even if you're over the phone, make sure you dress smartly and you're just polite and courteous at all times. You'd be amazed how many people fall over on basics like this. They turn up to an interview in jeans and a polo shirt. And if you think about when you work for an airline, you're representing the airline, you're walking through the airport wearing a uniform. If you can't even bother to turn up to an interview in a suit, then that doesn't give a great impression to the airline. Also, the other important thing is make sure you do your research on the airline. They're basically going to ask you a little bit of details about yourself, why you're interested in the company, and basically what you know about the company. So do your research, and it's really good to throw some specific sort of company facts back at them. So things like how your personal values align with the company values, stuff like that all goes down really well. If you know company's values, the company's mission, maybe some recent news, all of that goes down really well in interviews. The next bit we've got there is competency-based interviews. Now, I've never done an interview in the States, so I don't know if they happen too much over there, but in Europe and the Middle East and Asia, these are really, really popular right now. So this is basically when you get questions like, tell me a time where you've made an important decision in a time-critical situation, something like that. And answers to these questions are really hard to kind of make up on the spot. It's really hard to just think of an example of that really specific scenario. So I recommend having a look at the ICAO core competencies. So ICAO have got 8 core pilot competencies, and pretty much all interviews are based towards those competencies. So they're things like teamwork, workload management. Paul, your screen is, there we go. Yeah, things like workload management, decision making, professional standards, things like these. So yeah, make sure you've got a selection of sort of stories in your head from your personal experiences linking to those core competencies. We're finding actually technical interviews nowadays are a little bit rarer than they used to be, but it's always a good idea to sort of brush up on your technical knowledge a little bit before you go into an interview, and especially if you're applying for an interview for a job where you need a type rating. They'll probably ask you, some basic systems knowledge and stuff, just to make sure that you've got a good understanding of the aircraft itself. So the next thing you might experience during the interview process is group exercises. So these are when you're placed in a team, usually with other candidates that are going for the same job, and given a task to complete. It can be a theoretical task or a practical task. And I really enjoy them. Some people absolutely hate them. So basically what happens, usually each candidate is given sort of a specific piece of information, and you have to work as a team to make sure that everybody understands what the task is in its entirety, and complete sort of their section to the best of their ability. So as an example, you might be able to build a structure out of Lego, right? So the first person might have a little card that says the structure has to be 2 feet tall. And then the next person might have a card that says at least half the bricks need to be red. And then a third person might say only people with blonde hair can actually touch the Lego bricks. You kind of get the gist. So the whole point of the exercise is not necessarily to complete the task, but it's to show off all of your non-technical pilot skills. So this goes back to the ICAO core pilot competency. So things like communication, leadership, workload management, and all those good things. And to navigate this stage successfully, you need to be just a really solid, good team player, and you need to be able to communicate well. If the whole tower comes tumbling down at the end, it really doesn't matter. The outcome of the exercise is completely irrelevant. They just want to see how you interact in a group. And lastly, on that list in the current state, we've got the sim check. There's not a huge amount of advice I can give you for a sim check other than, practice, be confident, and just operate the aircraft like you would ordinarily. They're never looking for perfection. They're just looking for a safe pair of hands that kind of flies legally and safely and acts well in the cockpit situation. So moving on to what to expect in the future. This is actually happening in Europe quite a lot at the moment, but I don't think it's really gone across to the Americas too much yet. But in Europe now, a large element of the interview process revolves around pilot aptitude testing. Unfortunately, this all came about after the Germanwings crash in 2015, where the first officer, who had a history of psychological problems, basically locked the captain out of the cockpit and flew into a mountain, killing everybody on board. After this, EASA, the European regulator, did a huge investigation and basically concluded that there needs to be a lot more emphasis on sort of psychological well-being and general aptitude testing for pilots. So there are some great resources available to practice for these aptitude tests online. You can find some resources through pilotbase.com. And again, if you need any further assistance with that, feel free to contact me via email after this webinar.
Ben, I was trying to, part of the reason why my screen changed was I was trying to find those, I didn't put the ICAO core competencies or those online onto our links, but I guess it's at pilotbase.com, or are the ICAO core competencies up there as well?
I'll get a copy over to you, Paul.
Okay, great. And we'll add that to the links list. That'd be great.
Yeah, cool. Next slide, please. Okay, so this kind of brings us back full circle. And we thought it would just be quite nice to give you a bit of insight about why Coradine and Pilotbase teamed up in the first place and kind of what our plans are for the future, really. So basically, I told you previously, I was flying in the Middle East for a long time, a little bit too long, to be honest. I wanted to move back to the UK, and I found the whole process of job hunting and applications and interviews really, really time consuming, super repetitive, and actually got really expensive because I was flying back and forth all over the place. So I'd used LogTen for quite a while at this point, and I thought there must be a way of utilizing that valuable logbook data in a whole raft of other ways. So when I set up Pilotbase, I just thought I'd throw a Hail Mary and try and contact Paul directly to see if Coradine would be keen on trying an integration with our platform. I didn't really have a firm idea of what that integration would be, but I just thought I'd ask. And to my surprise, they were super keen, super supportive, and came up with a bunch of great ideas. And after, as Paul said, probably 10 months of software development and testing, we had liftoff a couple of months ago. And really happy to say we've got over 500 people now that have connected their LogTen logbook to Pilotbase. And that's we're actively helping people get employed, which is great. And I don't want to speak on Coradine's behalf, but I think we both kind of see this as the start of a really cool journey. We've got really similar business goals and values, and basically we just want to make pilots' lives easier with a whole load of less admin hassle, so we can free up your time to do the thing we all love doing, which is flying, right?
Absolutely. Couldn't have said it better. I'm really excited that you reached out to us, Ben, and it's something that just makes so much sense to have these things integrated. And it's where, as you say, the future is headed. And we're right at the. I feel like we're right at the beginning of that future, and I feel like we're leading the way, which is exciting. All right. Where are we now? Oh yeah, next steps. We just put a few little next steps in here in terms of signing up to Pilotbase, check it out, and tons of information on Pilotbase. I'm kind of speaking for Ben here, but please go on and sign up and check it out. If you're new to LogTen and you want to try LogTen out, you can get a 3-month free trial through Pilotbase, and it's all integrated as well. So you can you can connect your logbook and get the 3 months at the same time. I think we have the same deal with the NGPA as well. For anybody who's an NGPA member, they get that free time as well. And then connect your logbook, and I think it'd be awesome. Yeah. So I don't know, Ben, Heather, you got anything else to add?
Nope, nothing from my side. I think I've talked far too much already.
Thanks. And thanks again, Brian.
No, thank you guys. What great information. And it's so cool to see the continuous evolution of technology to make something that was so arduous in the past an easier process. And I love to see that continued rollout of different ways to integrate different platforms to work together, again, to make the life of aviators easier and totaling their flight time. And even more so with the connection with Pilotbase now, it's really cool to see how you're able to integrate that logbook piece now with job application storage and ways to quickly relay updated flight times into all the different applications you might have out there. I really like that video. Well, obviously the one that I love with that we talked about before that I had to pop in, but that first video that you showed, like, every aircraft taking off, every aircraft landing, damn it, I got to update my logbook times again. Damn it, I've got to go to this website, I've got to go to that website to make everything be cohesive across my applications. So it's really cool to see those technology advancements and integration, things that were not around when I was working on my career job, so to speak. So no, it's cool to see that happen. So kudos to both Coradine and Pilotbase for joining forces in that regard. So for our attendees here, we have moved to the area of question and answer. If you have a question for the Pilotbase and Coradine team, feel free to utilize the question and answer box. It's at the bottom of your screen. Right next to that, you'll see the raise hand. You can also raise your hand and we can unmute your microphone, and you could ask a live question right here to Ben, Heather, and Paul if you'd like to. I already have a couple of questions that have come through Q&A and some things that I've developed on my own here as I've been listening to your presentations. So let's kick it off with that. Maybe put some of you on the hot seat. First off, Paul and Heather, going right to Coradine here. This has come from Derek in the chat box as well as Sharon. They say, what is the outlook of, I guess that's using another terminology for a different programming, but what is the possibility of getting LogTen Pro to run on some of the lowly Android devices? Is that being researched? Is that in the works, or is that something that Android users can look forward to in the future? I'm sure you get this a lot.
Yeah, we do. My answer is not a my answer is unfortunate in terms of not moving on to the Android platform. It goes back to our history. Noah Lieberman, who started the company, is an Apple I don't know how I put this, like he's
aficionado.
Yeah, totally. And has always believed from a development, he's a developer as well. He developed LogTen, the first versions of LogTen as well, and has always felt like he wants to develop software for the best platform. His belief continues to be that that Mac, iPhone, iPad are the best platforms for users. So we've completely focused on iPhone, iPad, and Mac. And to be quite honest, like in terms of we just don't have the resource to build on the Microsoft platform really, so, or the Android platform. So right now there are no plans to move to Androids. We have actually had people purchase Apple devices in order to use LogTen, but I'm not suggesting you necessarily do that, and I'm sorry I can't answer in the affirmative.
Well, thank you for being completely transparent in that answer. And I sense a partnership with Apple here. If you're bringing people to Apple users, they should be sending some kickbacks your way. Maybe we should get Tim Cook on the phone. I think it's time to get him roped into all of this. No, but thank you for that. Also, Ben, you said something before, and I'm going to hold you to this now. I made a little note at the top of my notes here. It says interview tips. Ben, I'm going to hold you to this. You said I can do a whole other webinar just on interview tips. So you said it, came from your mouth. I'm going to hold you to that. I'll be following up with you soon about the next webinar just for interview tips. Okay. Be careful what you say. I'm always listening. Ben, while we have you in the hot seat here, in regards to Pilotbase, are there any connections to some of the common pilot application sites for when you upload your information or when you make that connection from Coradine and Pilotbase and it's constantly updating? Is there ways that Pilotbase communicates with airline apps or pilot credentials, some of the other websites out there that store applications for aviators?
So at present, no. As I said, we're a really new company. We only launched in September last year. So we've been very busy just building what we've got so far. We are super open to working with as many people as possible. I mean, I don't really believe in too much competition. I just want to build some cool stuff for pilots, being a pilot myself, right? So we currently don't integrate with anybody else. My vision for the future is basically to have a complete end-to-end process from job search all the way through to being employed without having to duplicate your information once. So that is the goal. Might take a little bit of time to get there, but we're definitely open for partnerships.
Cool. No, good to know. Thank you. Back to Paul and Heather. Derek asked, are there any applications? I'm trying to put opportunities and applications together. Are there any opportunities for lifetime subscriptions to LogTen Pro? Heather, I think this is right up your alley here.
So what I think Derek might be asking is, what would the price be to own LogTen Pro for life? What we used to have in the past, so our previous pricing model was a sort of buy-the-box software, similar to what Apple used to offer and Adobe Photoshop. You would buy an actual box with software in it. It was a major version. You ran it on your computer. As operating systems and devices continue to evolve and change, updates had to be made, and then eventually new entire versions and boxes of software would be created and sold. So there was a whole process where a single version was being worked on. Maybe there were one or two in-version updates, but then everybody had to sit and wait for the developers to make the next big thing. What we've transitioned to now with a subscription service is a sort of continuously updated, continuously almost perfected and working version of LogTen that is always going to work with the current devices and operating systems, as well as we're always working on creating updates and working with the new beta versions of operating systems and devices as well. So the subscription, the annual subscription, allows us to most accurately work on existing functionalities to make sure that everything's perfect, as well as future operating systems and functionalities. And it's more predictable, it's more level for everybody. The customers no longer have to sit and wonder when the next big update is coming out. So super short answer to that question would be, there is not a lifetime subscription available now, but signing up for a subscription automatically renews each year, and you just know predictability wise what's going to be happening and that everything will continue to work as it does. Anything to add to that, Paul?
No, I entirely agree with what you said. And the bottom line is that as we all know, these systems are continually updating and developing and changing, both from the device perspective and the system perspective, and that just requires a full team of engineers working on it full time. And we have an awesome support team. And I can actually, we did have a question. Sorry, Brian, I'm taking over your job now. We did have a question that came in that I answered in the Q&A just around transferring over data, like if you have an Excel spreadsheet, or if you have your data on some other platform and you want to move over to LogTen, this is another piece of the kind of subscription. Is we have an amazing support team that actually supports pilots in making that happen for them. It's not something you have to do. I mean, you can do in terms of transferring data over to LogTen, but our support teams got a lot of people there waiting and willing to help you in terms of that transfer over.
Thank you. No, I'm glad you mentioned that too, Paul, because I wanted to call out that question that you did answer in the Q&A already. From Jason Israel. Hello, Jason. Always good to see you joining us. Me and Jason go way back. We went to college together. So nice to see you, Jason. Thanks for being here. Specifically what he said, so everyone can't see what Jason asked, but Jason talked about having 22 years of paper logbook entries and how to get that kind of from an Excel spreadsheet over into LogTen Pro. But to follow up on his question, what would you say, Paul and Heather, to someone like Jason, or to probably thousands of other pilots who have years and years of paper logbook experiences and whatnot, and who might not be even to the point where Jason is, where he's already put that into an Excel spreadsheet? What would you say to folks who are considering an electronic logbook, but think about, holy crud, I have so many years of data. This is such an arduous task. This is going to take forever. What would you say to them to convince them that it is a good path forward? And what's the best way to start out on that journey of taking all that paper stuff and making it electronic?
Why don't you take this one, Heather? And I'll actually put the link to our Balance Forward video into our link section.
Getting ahead. Yeah, awesome. The sooner the better. The more you sit and think and stress about it, the more looming it's going to seem. The second that you actually sit down, and I did this myself when I started working for Coradine 8 years ago, is I took my paper logbook, and I actually started with the first entry. I only have a couple hundred hours, but for those of you who may have more than one logbook or several thousand hours, it's really, really simple to get started with a balance forward entry. So you can make it as simple as, entering in a single line item for how many single engine aircraft and multi-engine aircraft hours you have. Once you get those base hours in, you'll see your total time will automatically reflect where you're at currently. And then based on how much time and how detailed you want to get further down the line, you can start dividing that up either by seat or by conditions. You can even get as detailed as scanning and sending in your paper logbook details to some of our partner companies who will transcribe those over to electronic and provide you with a fully imported logbook. So just depending on time, resources, and exactly the details that you want to see, there's a lot of really interesting and easy ways to get started with LogTen. And the second that you start updating your hours and have them in electronic form, you're going to start feeling a million times better.
It's good to know that there's resources out there that can assist with that process. I know it is an arduous task. I did it myself. I made the switch over. Oh God, that was almost 7 years ago, and I had only about 7.5 years of paper logbook stuff to put in. But even that was a multi-month task. But now there's so many more services out there and resources to utilize to make the switch over even easier. So, Paul, I think you dropped something in the. Did you drop something in the chat? You dropped something for us. Resources, right?
So yeah, I just put that link to the Balance Forward entry into the links. It might be good to throw that link in there again because it's up higher now, but maybe throw in the master link there. We also had a message from Derek. I was going to answer it typing, but then I clicked the wrong button. So around MCC Pilot, just to say we do those imports all the time. Our support team, so just reach out, support@coradine.com, and we can absolutely help you with transferring data over from MCC if that's what you'd like to do. Totally. And we had another couple of questions in there, but I'll leave that to you, Brian, to.
Thanks for catching Derek's question there. And Luke, our fantastic ops coordinator for NGPA, if you don't mind dropping that in that Coradine and NGPA link back into the top of the chat, Luke, if you have a moment. Two more things. I know we're past an hour now. Everyone okay still on time? We good? We good? Keep you for another like 5 minutes here. Ben, a question for you. For our European members who are watching, as well as our webinar attendees, I know the outlook on European aviation hasn't been all that rosy. It's been pretty rough. Things are turning around a little bit faster here in the US, actually quite a bit faster here in the US. Is there a positive outlook that's being talked about in the European aviation market? And how far off are, I guess, industry insiders currently speculating for a turnaround in hiring back for European carriers? Any insight you can provide would be appreciated.
Yeah, for sure. So it's very easy to look at all the headlines and it look really, really bleak, especially with some of those graphs I sent you. There are some nuggets of good news floating around. So what I think is going to happen here is some of the carriers which previously weren't operated particularly well, but they had slots in good airports and good routes and, have just been around for a long time. Those are the ones that have been hit hardest. And actually, you've got some new airlines popping up. So I don't know if you've seen there's like Fly North, Flyer, Pop Air. There's a whole bunch of new airlines that are kind of plugging the gaps where the legacy airlines have failed. And obviously, they all need to be resourced. They all need to be crewed. And I think it's going to act as quite a bit of a wire brush for the whole industry in Europe. And I hate to say it, but clean out some of the wheat from the chaff. And hopefully we kind of move forward with a bit of a leaner, greener aviation industry post-pandemic. And with that, I think most analysts at the moment, it's a real finger in the air jobby, isn't it? Because it just depends on which variant comes out next and which country decides it's the worst thing in the world. But most analysts are saying from this point, probably about 12 to 18 months before we get close to sort of pre-pandemic levels. And that's sort of considering that no further sort of degenerations in the variants come out. But we're just going to have to wait and see. International travel is destroyed, and it just depends on, it's more of a political game at this point.
Yeah, no, true. I will need a translation on one thing you said, wheat to chaff. What does that mean? What did you say?
Separate the wheat from the chaff. That just means, separating the good from the bad, basically.
I appreciate that. Thank you for doing the active translation there. No, cool. No, it's good to have that. It's good to have that insight, especially at least from my knowledge. I am more specific to my knowledge is based really solely here in the U.S. A question for Coradine. Again, this is from Doug Carr, one of our board of directors members here at NGPA. Kind of cool. He said an odd question. How well would the resources around LogTen Pro and whatnot work for aviation enthusiasts who want to track their time flying in the back of the plane? And then he goes on to say, too much, wrong audience, maybe an opportunity, but something kind of interesting. I know Doug, a lot of the times when he flies around, he works with the NBAA. He's within government affairs there. I love to see his posts on social media. Doug, sorry, I'm throwing you out here now, of the different programs that he uses to actually follow the flight he's on while he's sitting in the back as a passenger. And is that ever been thrown out within LogTen Pro to have aviation enthusiasts track their time in the back?
I really appreciate you bringing it up. It's something that I personally do. I actually am not one of our pilots at Coradine, and I often use LogTen to track my own flying. It's free for the first 250 hours anyways, which I don't think in my lifetime I've flown over 250 hours yet anyway. So I don't know, maybe I have. So it's totally possible to do. We haven't actually thought about it as a marketing opportunity because, mainly because the revenue comes through pilots and using it beyond the 250 hours, but it's kind of a fun idea. I like it. Thanks for bringing it up.
All these new business ideas.
Yeah.
So I've had multiple pilots come into the cockpit when I worked for the airlines with LogTen for that exact reason.
Huh. Cool. That's pretty neat.
It's really cool. All right, one more question here, and then we'll be respectful of everyone's time. Adam asked that the civilian and military aviation communities are quite different, and was wondering if you have any advice for military aviators that are looking to transition to the civilian world in the near future. Obviously, putting all military time into an electronic logbook like LogTen Pro would be advisable, but are there any other tips that you might have for a military transition to civilian aviation?
Heather, I wonder if any thoughts on that? I mean, the one thing that I think of is that LogTen has the ability you can set a certain amount of time to add on, because I know the military they tend to log flight time slightly differently. So you can add a percentage onto each flight that you put into your logbook, which we can add a link to show you how to do that in our master links tab. So that's one piece of it. I know we have worked in the past with a company called Millkeep in the US that works specifically with that transition from military to commercials. So that might be something to look into. I haven't been in touch with them in quite a while, but I know they help a lot of military pilots with that transition, and they probably have a lot of tips on their site, and and provide consulting services to pilots as well. So maybe check that out. Anything to add, Heather?
Just that we're pretty well versed and familiar with helping with that transition. It happens quite often, and our support team has a bunch of neat tips and tricks that we can share with you. We have specific fields that are for military time. We have specific military reports. The only other thing I guess I could add would be smart groups. As you go forward with logging some civilian time, it would be really easy for you to create some smart groups to separate out that military time from the civilian time, so you can see hours at a glance just by filtering for different points of information. So bring it on over. We'd love to have you.
There you have it, Adam. The Coradine team stands ready to assist, and definitely a large familiarity with the military transition time in there as well. So thank you for that. One last question before we end things here, just came in from Corey. Corey said, it's a new student pilot here, and in your opinion, do you think that the hiring craze will continue for the next few years? Ben, I open that up to you, or what anyone else thinks. I have my own opinion. I'm happy to share it, or I can keep it to myself.
I think yes, but it'll get a little bit more it'll get a little bit more narrow. So at the moment, what's happening is the majors have basically said, you know, oh, we need 2,000 pilots in the next 4 years, and somebody else says, okay, we need 3,000 pilots, and that then panics everybody else down the chain. So all the regionals like, oh crud, we're going to lose our pilots to the majors, so we're going to start recruiting in preparation for that. So I think there's a bit of a sort of a hump at the moment of everybody is right. We don't want to get under-resourced here, so there's this big boom. I think it'll even out a little bit, but I think it will maintain for the next few years.
Yeah, and I would agree with you, Ben, and Corey. I'd say to you, as his new student pilot here, number one, congratulations. Welcome to the world of aviation. You're hooked now. Good luck. You're never going to want to walk away from it. But definitely in terms of US, specific to US, I do work for a major, well, I work for JetBlue. I have no problem saying it. I work for JetBlue. I've been a pilot with them for many years. And JetBlue, along with multiple other carriers here in the US, have found themselves in a situation where they let a lot of people depart the company due to the pandemic, and had early retirements, had people leave for maybe some of the cargo carriers and whatnot. And now we're caught a little bit behind the curve because all of a sudden everyone is out traveling again. But with the different variants, as Ben has talked about, and different importance levels placed on travel restrictions by different political entities, both locally on state levels here in the US, by the country level, by international levels and whatnot, that is going to change the ability for carriers to continue their robust travel schedules. We've seen a major return to travel here in the US, a lot of revenge travel, they've called it. But now a lot of airlines are already reporting a bit of a drop-off, a percentage drop-off in new bookings due to the Delta variant, and folks being worried about transmission rates and infection rates across the US. I think that's going to be definitely a very oddly cyclical thing. It's going to be going up and down probably for the next year or plus, as we learn to deal with COVID-19 as a normal fixture within society, just like we had the flu epidemic many years ago, and we've learned how to deal with the flu on a regular basis. I think it's going to be the same thing for COVID, and that's going to have a very interesting effect on the needs of airlines and the amount of travel that's happening. So Corey, the bottom line is the need to hire pilots is going to be very high going forward. There has already been a known pilot shortage that was staved off for about a year and a half now due to COVID. Now it seems to be coming back with vengeance. It might be staved off again for a couple months, but the need is going to be great. So you're in a great position as you continue to move along with your piloting aspirations. So keep at it, Ben.
Yeah, so just one more thing to say about that. When COVID hit, there was loads of voluntary retirements as well. So a lot of the retirement ages have been brought forwards. So the resourcing plan does have a little bit of this gap in there. And also there was a lot less people over the last sort of 18 months that have been doing flying training. So you've got a little bit of a lower supply and you've got the higher demand due to the retirements as well, which kind of add to that bubble moving forwards a little bit. So yeah, Corey, I think you're in decent shape. If you're sitting there in the States, I think you'll be absolutely fine.
For sure. Totally. I just have to ask, Heather, what's the little guy on your desk? It's been thinking that the whole time. This is like cute little dude in the background there. Nice.
It's a G.I. Joe character. I'm not familiar with it, but I like her.
I love it.
Awesome.
Well, I just want to say a very big thank you, Paul, Heather, Ben. Thank you so much for spending time with us yet again, dedicating your time to the aviation community, the passions for your craft and for the work that you're doing at Pilotbase and the continued technological improvements that Coradine continues to make. And of course, the dedication to diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's so important to us. It's so important to you. And that has become very evident through the relationship that we've built, Paul and Heather, over the past, I think now almost 4 years that I've been working with the both of you. So it's always so inspiring, and I truly appreciate everything you do for us here at NGPA. And I love these events because Paul's coming to us from Canada. He's over on the west coast of Canada near Vancouver. Heather's over in the Portland, Oregon area. Ben all the way from the UK, down south of London. Myself from Chicago. Luke running our background technology here in Minneapolis. These events are so cool because it is so worldly. It brings us all together from different places around the country, around the world. And it's just cool to spend time with each other at a time we haven't been able to do it in person. So thank you again for being with us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Brian.
Yeah, thanks for your time.
And
guys.
to everyone, and to everyone who's tuned in, thank you so much for being part of our NGPA Up in the Air webinar series. You can join us again next week. We will be back next week on August 25th. That's going to be at 4 p.m. Eastern time. We're going to be hosting a session with the famous Brian Schiff, and he's going to be talking about being a pilot in command. He'll be talking about the fact that in the airlines, pilot commands are very clear because it's the title of captain. But what about in general aviation aircraft? Many pilots in general aviation might take that title of pilot in command for granted. He's going to entertain you with some of his experiences from regulations and aeronautical decision making and discuss many of the aspects of what being a pilot in command truly is. So we hope you'll join us next Wednesday, August 25th at 4 p.m. Eastern. Check out more about NGPA at www.ngpa.org. You can join now. That's that link up in the top right to become a member and to continue to support our mission and support webinars like these. On behalf of Paul, Heather, and Ben, and the entire NGPA leadership team, thanks everyone for joining us. Thanks for tuning in to our podcast as well. And we'll see you next time here at NGPA's Up in the Air. Take care of yourselves and each other. Bye, everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.